This meeting of the Board of Adjustment to order. With a roll call, please.
Jonathan Spencer.
Present.
Stacy Brady is absent. Don Jenna is absent. Pete McClintock.
Present.
Scott Primo.
Present.
Primo. Joseph Reamer.
Present.
And Jack Rychecki.
Here.
All right, next item on the agenda is approval. Before that, I guess we have elections.
All right, so introduction of new board members and election of officers. Wanted to introduce our new board members first of all, and we have Pete McClintock is joining us, and Joseph Reamer and Scott Primo. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Do we have any nominees for the chair?
I nominate Jonathan Spencer.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that. Yep.
Okay. All right, are there any other nominations?
I'd nominate Stacy Brady for vice chair.
Oh,
Or we
I'm
got to
actually going to do
finish chair
chair,
first.
just chair first.
My apologies.
Okay, so let's go ahead and vote for Jonathan Spencer for chair. Please vote using your toggle switches.
Yes. All right. That works. Where'd it go?
All right, that's 4-4, and the motion passes. Any nominations for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Stacy Brady for vice chair.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Any other nominations for vice chair? All right, let's take a vote. All those in favor, please use your toggle switch. And that's unanimous for Stacy Brady as vice chair. Go ahead and turn it back over to Chair Spencer.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the March 17th meeting. Do we have any questions or comments on those minutes? If not, do we have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes of the March 17th meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, pull the board, please. All right, meetings are approved. Next, do we have any public comment or folks that aren't speaking on anything that's already on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to the first item on the agenda, which is the public hearing for VAR 16-0002, the case for variance to the 6-foot maximum fence height for a rear and side yard fence in the R1 zone district at 6138 South Gallup Street.
For the record, my name is Pam Hall, and I'm a planner at the City of Littleton. I've just presented the board with exhibits for case VAR 16-0002, variance to the 6-foot maximum height for rear and side yard fences in the R1 zone district at 6138 South Gallup Street. Applicant Mike Kisting is representing the de-scaled nuns at the Carmelite Monastery. And this home was built back in 1880 and was subsequently added onto throughout the years. The property was sold to the nuns in 1947. Around the same time frame, an 8-foot fence was constructed along the east and south property lines, enclosing the rear yard for the nuns' privacy and to uphold their rule and constitutions. In 1997, a fence permit was pulled and the current 6-foot fence was installed. The nuns wished to replace the current fence with an 8-foot fence. The following rules of the nuns and their rules and constitutions outline the screening requirements for the nuns. Rule number 65 states that the walls should be as strong as possible, those of the enclosure high, referring to the house and grounds. Rule 215 says that the law of enclosure applies to all parts of the house inhabited by the nuns, including the garden and yard reserved to them. Finally, Rule 216 states that all parts within the enclosure will be encircled by a high wall in accordance with number 65 of these constitutions. And if any part of the convent or garden is visible from the exterior, the necessary means will be taken to prevent the nuns seeing persons outside the enclosure or being seen by them. The nuns have been in violation of their rule and constitution since the 6-foot fence was installed due to the property's topography and the fact that the properties on the west side of Gallup are located at a higher elevation, and as such can see into a large portion of the nun's backyard, as documented in photo 5 of the applicant's, his application. So the Littleton zoning ordinance 10-4-3 requires a maximum fence height of 6 feet for side and rear fences. But section 1011(1)B gives the board authority to grant variances where, due to exceptional and extraordinary circumstances, literal enforcement of the provisions of this title will result in unnecessary hardship. No variance can be approved unless the board finds that all of the criteria stated in 1011(1)B have been met. So the first criteria is that the variance will not authorize the operation of a use other than those specifically listed as primary permitted uses for the zone district in which the affected property is located. This requested variance would not permit any use other than uses permitted in the R1 single-family district. The second criterion is that the variance would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or zone in which the property is located, or substantially or permanently impair the allowed use or development of adjacent property. Most side and rear fences in the surrounding neighborhoods are 6 foot high. The requested 8-foot fence may alter the character of the neighborhood, yet it would not permanently impair the allowed use or the development of the adjacent properties. Number 3, the variance is the minimum that would afford relief and the least possible modification to the provision in question. Because of the change in elevation to the west of Gallup and the fact that the nuns' property and their main house sits at a lower elevation, as previously shown on photo 5, the 8-foot fence is the minimum to be able to screen the backyard from the public. Number 4, the variance would not adversely affect the public health, safety, and welfare. The variance would not adversely affect health, safety, or welfare of the public. And number 5, that the hardship, if any, underneath which the variance is sought was not created by the owner, occupant, or agent of the owner of the property in question, nor was it suffered as a result of a violation of any provision of this code. The current 6-foot fence does not provide the privacy that the nuns need to adhere to their rule and constitution due to the higher elevation of Gallup Street at the rear of their property. Because of this, the provisions of Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act should be taken into consideration by the board. The city attorney provided a memorandum to the Board of Adjustment prior to the hearing to explain the implications of RLUIPA. So should the board decide to grant the requested variance, staff recommends that specific conditions be included in the motion for approval to mitigate impacts from the increased fence height. This would include a condition that any new fence would be located either in the same location as the current fence or possibly a further setback from the right-of-way than the existing fence. So after saying all that, does the board have any questions of staff at this time?
Yes, Ms. Hall. I noticed in your recommendations you did not address duration. Is it possible, if a variance were granted, to make the duration of the variance subject to continuous and notorious occupation by the Discount Carmelites?
That would be a possibility, especially since variances rule with the land, and, you know, it would be a permanent thing. So that would be something to consider.
Because it would be based on their constitution and for their convenience. And if for some reason, as I understand it from the documentation, it's occupied by 5 nuns at the current time.
It's more than 5 nuns.
More than 5
I don't know
sisters.
the exact number, but the applicant can address that question.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions of staff?
I had a question. The previous fence that was there that was replaced, that was an 8-foot fence?
Correct.
The original one that was there prior to 1997, I believe it was?
Correct. From 1947 to 1997, there was an 8-foot fence
Okay,
in the same location that the 6-foot is currently.
okay. Any other questions for staff?
Okay, well, I will introduce the applicant, Mike Kisting.
Please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Mike Kisting. My address is 2354 South Sand Creek Court in Bennett, Colorado. And I'm representing the Discalled Carmelite Nuns. They are a papal cloistered nun, which means it's the strictest cloister in the Catholic Church. So none of them could be here today to do this, so they had to kind of let me do that. First thing I'd like to say is thank you. Pam's constantly doing all my work for me. She said I had to put together a presentation, and she covered most of my presentation in her introduction there. The only thing that I'd like to add is the date that these rules and constitutions were put into effect is actually, I have a copy of that. I don't know if you all have a copy of that in front of you, but the date that these were adopted is 1581, the year of our Lord, 1581. So this has been followed everywhere throughout the world since that date, and she already read everything I wanted to read. So I guess I'll kind of leave that be where it lay. Let me see. And as the other thing that we need to recognize, I believe, you know, going through the paperwork that you guys have, it's very straightforward. This is a unique situation. It's not like they're going to have, you know, 6 or 8 more monasteries moving into Littleton. This is the only Carmelite monastery that there is there, so it is kind of a unique situation. And as you can imagine, the adherence that some of us have to our religious beliefs are nothing but a shadow as to what these women believe. There are currently 11 nuns inside there. 6 of them are over the age of 76. Part of the other issue that we were having is, I know it's been kind of removed, is the fact that about anybody can jump a 6-foot fence. And we've had quite a bit of that happen in the last 3 years, or 2 years. We've had 3 incidences. One of those instances where they had an individual chase one of the younger nuns back into the building. He was trying to catch her. I have here, it's so common that people jump a 6-foot fence that, did you realize that almost every police department in the United States requires that a new officer be able to jump a 6-foot fence to pursue these guys? So if we put aside all of the rules and constitutions, which the nuns can't. It's their way of life. It's what they do. That's their vow. They're in there praying for all of us. Right now, there's 11 nuns on their knees right now praying for all of us, and individually, especially for you guys. So it's what they do for their community, you know. And I am Catholic. I'm the guy that works over there all the time. And I don't get exception to the rule either. Just to go in and mow the grass, or to go in and relight a pilot light, it takes an act of God. Okay, so Mother has to round up all the nuns, move them to a location where they cannot see me, and then I cannot see them. So it's to me, it's something that should have been elementary, because I've been Catholic my entire life, but I've learned quite a bit about who they are and what they do, and have a whole new respect for it. And it really irritates me to no end that the previous contractor, and I'm one of those guys, just took the easy road. As I started off with, you guys do a fantastic job over here. I've been doing this 27 years, and I'm telling you, Littleton it's a great city to work in. Your people work so hard. You know, Pam calls me at 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, and, you know, just to make sure everything's organized. And all of the people over in the permit office, just the very best people I've dealt with in my entire life doing this. So I can't believe that he didn't do his due diligence and get the right size fence. We wouldn't be doing this right now. So, the very last thing I'd like you to do is just close your eyes, and I want you to picture the world that you went through for the past week. Did you go walk your dog? Did you take your kid down to the park and throw a ball with him? What I want you to do is take some of that away. Those are your freedoms that we as individuals take for granted every day. This 13-acre facility that these girls have is their entire world. Those 6 nuns over the age of 76 will not go out into the backyard because they know they can be seen. We took their world away. As a lazy contractor, took that world away from them, and that's wrong. All I'm asking, and it's not like they're doing anything out there but gardening and walking around praying. We're just asking that we reinstate their world. That's all they've got.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Have any questions for the applicant?
Yes, sir. I noticed on the plat map that I have, there is a red line. Is that red line that I see on this plat map?
Yes,
That's
sir.
Existing location of the fence.
That is the existing location of what they call the cloister. So that's the area that the nuns are confined to. They cannot leave that
Okay.
red line. So all the other stuff, like the parking lot, none of that would be included in this variance whatsoever. They have no problem with that. It's just where people can see them.
Yeah, because I walk along that trail to the north, and I can see the front yard, but not the rear.
Yep.
Okay.
It's really just the privacy fence that's along that area, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
What type of fence are you proposing to put in there?
We're going to put up it's a 1x6 dog-eared cedar, just like the stuff that's there now. The only difference is you know, you won't see it from the outside. It's going to be exactly the same. It's just going to be steel posts so that they can't afford to put this fence up. If it weren't for very generous parishioners there and, you know, and an insurance claim, they wouldn't be able to afford to put this fence up. So we're going to try and do it right this time.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Yes. Have any other mitigation been considered? like beyond a fence, plants perhaps, or anything like that?
We've planted I think 147 trees, but, it takes quite a while for those to grow. And we lost, I believe, 35 just in the last 2 storms. So unfortunately, it just doesn't grow fast enough, all the young nuns that get old by the time they can access their own backyard.
Is there a potential there be additional nuns in the future at this location?
Mother Superior has actually brought in 3 just in the last 2 months. She's the only one you can actually visually see. She's done a fantastic job, and she intends on filling it up. She wants to put 22 nuns back in there. That's her job, and she takes it very seriously.
Thank you for that information, because when I brought up how many were living there in the duration, I saw how many convents there are of the order around the United States, and there are quite a few.
There are.
So I didn't know if this was a declining location or expanding location. So thank you for that information, sir.
You betcha. No other questions for me?
Any more? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
All right, I see we have quite a few folks signed up to speak, so I guess we can start that process. Everybody will get 3 minutes. Donna Thenell, my apologies. And just please state your name and address for the record.
Of course. My name is Donna Thenell, and I currently reside at 2950 West Roland Place in the city of Littleton.
And it looks like you support this project?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And first of all, I'd like to tell you that in 1971, I moved to 1331 West Cayley Avenue, which is right adjacent to Gallup and Cayley, and the monastery fronts Cayley on that south end. So I lived there for more than 30 years. And I would just like to say that that monastery is a real asset to the city of Littleton, and particularly the grounds that are adjacent to your Littleton Museum and the library complex. So having said that, I really would just like to say that anyone who objects to, particularly maybe the people on Gallup Street that would object to this higher fence. Number one, it doesn't block their view from anything. The mountains are to the west of them. And secondly, I would like to say that they need to consider that should the nuns ever need to vacate that property for whatever reason, security or such, the very likelihood is they would be facing a very large multifamily complex in there. It's 13 usable acres, so understand that's revenue to the city in its own right, but nevertheless, I think this is such a unique place that it's really worth your consideration to preserve it. And I would conclude by saying that my son now occupies that property on Cayley Avenue, and I spoke to him today, and he completely agrees with my position. So this would come as residents of the area.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next, we have Ann Young.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Ann Young, and I reside on 958 West Briarwood Avenue, Littleton, Colorado. And I'm a native Littletonite, and I've lived around the Carmelite Monastery my entire life, on Gallup, on Eladia Street, on Greenwood, and now on Briarwood. So they have been excellent neighbors my entire life. They're peaceful, kind. Sorry, I got a little nervous. They're quiet, respectful, and they keep their property up, and they've never committed any crimes. So for me, that's good Littleton neighbors, and I'd like to encourage that we continue to keep them here and foster that relationship with them. They're very valuable and unique to Littleton being one of a very few of the cloistered nuns. There are lots of Carmelite nuns, but very few monasteries that actually have the cloistered nuns. And so that's of significance and value in itself. And they are a draw for people to come live in this area because they want to be by something of that kind of cultural and historical significance. And so the Carmelites themselves are part of the historical fabric of our city. It's part of what makes us unique, like Bemis Library and the Kettering Lake and the club at the courthouse and the old library and the Platte River. These are things that define Main Street, Littleton, and have been here my entire life. And people come here for that and the value that we place on the historical roots of our city. And another thing that I find desirous of them is that they maintain that green space and that integrity of what makes Littleton so special is our acres and acres of green space. And they maintain that and keep it that way. And as you saw from your walks, as I've walked that same walk my whole life, you can see so much of it, and the beauty is there, and the peace is there. And in this busy world, it's nice to have somewhere you have respite and calm and peace. And they don't limit that to only Catholics. That's open to anyone, and people come there all the time and rest. And they've even opened a community garden in some of that space that's on the other side of the red line. Mm-hmm. And so finally, the nuns themselves provide a really great service. They listen to phone calls from people in distress all day long, and they pray for them. And they give food and other items to the poor in the community around them. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Carmela La Soria. Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Carmela Soria. I reside at 8145 South Adams Way, Centennial, Colorado. Colorado native, born and raised right off of Sycamore Street. My home's no longer there, parents' home. But I remember walking to Arapahoe Fairgrounds with my saddle, and this used to be my big playground. But I wish I could move back to Littleton, but I'm in your neighboring city of Centennial, which I'm happy. But anyway, I was not going to speak, but I will speak now. As a young girl, I used to kind of like run around the grounds, not the grounds at the monastery, but admire them for their courage for being closeted in there, enclosed. And as an adult, I respect the fact that they do provide the grounds for us Catholics and for everyone to go in and meditate and pray. And I am not opposed to the fence. It's just a part of our history of Littleton that they've always had that fence, and it just becomes such a mystery on what's the other side. And as a young girl, I remember trying to peek through the fence, see if I could see a nun or something. But I would like to place my yes and for the fence. And they do help the community. They help communities even around the country, because we are able to contact them by a letter or attending the Mass and leaving a little envelope or something, just to assist them, and they can pray for us. And just thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And my apologies, I called you up here, I saw this. The next listed is Fernanda Scott, not going to speak tonight, but in favor. The next one on the list, Anthony Bruno. Please state your name and address.
Anthony Bruno, 6468 South Gallup Street.
And it looks like you're in favor.
Correct.
Okay. Do you have anything else to add to that, or?
I do. I've lived here 54 years, right down the street from the nuns. I've been going to Mass there since I was tiny. In fact, I once told one of the sisters that I wanted to take Jesus off the cross when I was 3, because it looked awful. And she laughed. And that nun is buried in the cemetery on the property. I have very sincere ties to the sisters. I have worked for them, in fact, our whole family has, over the years. They've been here since 1947. They're a center of worship for Catholics in the area. You'd be shocked at how many people come there to visit. Just last week I walked in and there was one of my students and his family cleaning. They're like, "What are you doing here, Mr. Bruno?" I'm like, "I come here too." But nonetheless, and my student lives out by Chatfield. He goes to Chatfield High School and their whole family comes over. But nonetheless, they pray and counsel so many in this area. And the increase of the fence will help their safety because they have dealt with all sorts of terrible situations. I've been called at 11 o'clock at night to come over. The sisters are like, "There is somebody on the property." So I immediately call the police because the nuns call me first before they call the police because I live down the street. I'm like, "Sister, I'm calling the police and I'm coming up now." So I have to meet the police and then I have to get the key and then I have to unlock the gate and walk in and we search everywhere. And these are people that we cannot identify. I've not only done that, but fixing the other fence with the posts, literally 46 posts we pounded in one afternoon to tighten the fence. And while we walked the fence, I found little fires, campfires with beer bottles, and you name it. I don't know if it's who it is, but I would say there's high school kids walking around on their property, and I don't think it's the nuns doing that, actually. But it takes forever with the getting the police there. And the fence would just be such a wonderful deterrence. And do keep in mind, there are several nuns buried on the property, and it makes me sad to think that there are complete strangers walking over their graves. It's a very sacred thing. So I ask that you please approve this project because the ends outweigh the means. The means outweigh the ends. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Jermaine Bruno. She's not scheduled to speak, but supports this. Steve Palucci also supports, but not scheduled to speak this evening. Lizzie Dean is not supporting this project and is not speaking either. My apologies if I butcher anybody's names here. Mark Rudnicks, he wishes to speak in favor. Please state your name and address, please.
My name is Mark Rudnicki, 6062 South Aberdeen Street, Littleton, obviously. I'm the president of the Aberdeen Village Improvement Association. That's the association that neighbors just to the east of the monastery. General consensus of the neighborhood association is in favor of granting the height variance. Just a few questions and comments. I looked at the red line drawing, and it was said that that's where the new fence, the new higher fence is going to be going. There was concern that the chain link fence that is along the south walkway along Kettering Park would also have that high fence, but apparently that is not true. Also, we don't wish to have the fence along Lakeview Drive replaced with a higher fence. So that's pleases the association. Let's see. There was some curiosity about the harassment of the nuns, first I've ever heard of it, and we were wondering how many times it's happened and whether it's been reported to the police. Apparently it has. I'm not sure what recreational benefit somebody hopping the fence would be. As an architect, I wouldn't mind hopping the fence to see a very fine example of a Jacques Benedict building, but I've restrained myself. The amendment that was a possibility that the height limit only goes with the continuous use by Carmelite Monastery would be something that I would agree with. So I'd hope that would be an amendment to the main motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Kurt McDonald.
Good evening to the board.
Good evening. State your name and address, please.
6214 South Datura Street, Littleton, of course. So I'm not here to either oppose or to deny, but I do have some questions and I have some observations. I'm retired and I walk the perimeter of the monastery every single day. When you walk the perimeter, the height of the fence you cannot see over, but you can definitely see through it. And I'm concerned that we're going to put an 8-foot fence up and still be able to see through it, which would kind of defeat the entire purpose that they're trying for variance. Because the question before the board is not whether the nuns are good people. I think we would all agree in the room they are. The question is variance and whether other variance will be granted past this for other circumstances too. So in this case, in walking the perimeter and talking to Ms. Hall this afternoon, I asked her if she had walked the perimeter before making her report. Her answer was no. So my suggestion was maybe she should walk the perimeter and see that you can see through the fence. Now I noticed that there are evergreens that pretty much wrap the perimeter just on the other side of the fence. So my observation and suggestion would be to say, use a setback similar to a construction or a building setback and put the 8-foot fence in, but put it in past the evergreen trees. That mitigates the impact on the public and it enforces their integrity to their secrecy. As long as we are within those parameters, with those exceptions, I don't have a problem with it. But if we were to just put an 8-foot fence up, then I would say, well, I live on an 1.5 acres in this neighborhood, and I've had my neighbors peer over and take photographs into my yard. So I might come before the board and say, hey, I want an 8-foot fence now on my property. Or there might be a mechanic in downtown Littleton who says, somebody's kind of climbing my fence and stealing my carports. And then we get to be a place where how high does it have to be to prevent these bad things? So again, it's not a matter of being against or for, it's a matter of saying, let's do it with care and purpose. And if we have a dual fence standard, you couldn't see through the fence and they would have their secrecy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Lucy Nolan.
Good evening, Board. I'm Lucy Nolan. I live at 1251 West Long Court, and I grew up just 2 blocks from the monastery, and I'm speaking in favor of the variance. I just wanted to let you know that I was speaking to the mother, and she told me that I wasn't aware that the monastery has an impact that just not only affects the people in Colorado, but as somebody also spoke earlier, they get about 900 contributions from people all over the U.S. So I just wanted to say that not only is it a wonderful place of contemplation and prayer for the people of Littleton, but many other people also benefit from the monastery outside of Colorado. So we're very lucky to have them.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next up, Pam Chadbourne.
Good evening, Board. My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live in District 1. I grew up on Broadway, and you can tell that was 50 years ago that my mom went to the monastery and bought honey. We kids couldn't really always go in because I think my mom did not want us to disrupt the nature of the monastery. So I think that this land use is great and it's historic and it's established. The staff presentation seemed to note only one exception to criteria 2. The fence may alter the character of the neighborhood. I don't think so, because when I grew up, the fence was 8 feet. And apparently the contractor violated arguably the terms of their contract when they installed a 6-foot fence and not an 8-foot fence to replace an 8-foot fence, a betrayal of the trust of the nuns. So I'm quite clear that this should be an 8-foot fence. It was for decades, and it wasn't for a while because of the contractor's failure. The amendment sounds reasonable, continuous use by the nuns, good point. But otherwise, I not only don't see any reason not to grant the variance, but there's every reason for Littleton to grant this variance. These folks are integral to the community. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not a religious person, so I'm not here to say, because of their religion, it's actually because of their religion we protect their use, but also I respect their use of this land. So thanks for your consideration, and please grant the variance.
Thank you. Could we get your address just for the record, please?
I will write it down, but
Okay.
District 1 is good, and that provides it for the record. Thanks.
Thank you. Next would be Stephen Fleischer, I believe. Okay. Next up, Jan Leiken. My apologies. Next, we have John Sears, also in support but not speaking. Megan Flanagan, in support but not speaking. And then a name, I apologize that I cannot read. Michael Doran, would you like to speak? Please state your name and address.
Michael Doran, 10840 West Alamo Place. And Mother is my little sister, and it bothers me that people come over that fence. I want the variance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom Dorn, in support but not speaking. Christine Quispe, thank you.
I'm Christine Quispe, and I reside for the present at 6045 South Milwaukee Way in Centennial. We are renting at that location, but we are aggressively looking in Littleton. So I am Exhibit A for one of those people that's looking to come here. And I, too, am related to Mother in a certain sense. I was a classmate of hers in high school. I am coming back to Colorado. I'm a native Coloradan. From California, I've been away for 30 years. So it is exceedingly important that my 5 children, my 7 children actually, but the 5 that remain at home, have the experience of this radical kind of love that the Carmelites have for everyone that does not need to be seen to be effective. I also had one other thought when the gentleman before was mentioning about the foliage coverage. If the foliage is on the outside of the fence, it requires maintenance, additional cost to the nuns, more work for Mr. Kisting and others who help out at the monastery. So that's just one other idea that occurred to me while I was listening to the contributions. But so it's important for our family that the variance be passed. Thank you.
Thank you. This was all that was on the list. I know other folks have come in since then. Is there anybody else that would like to speak either in favor or opposition?
Thank you, Board. My name's Stephen Gedney. Live at 2046 West Davies Avenue in Littleton. Also, my daughter Teresa Gedney should be on the list. We're both in favor. I would say the fact that the original ordinance allowed them to have an 8-foot fence. The contractor made a mistake, put in a 6-foot fence, and I ask the board to return to the original ordinance that was made for this fence, for the protection of the sisters. Also say that they are a vital part of the heart of Littleton, they're the spiritual heart. All of us here benefit from their presence in their prayers. And also, we owe it to them to grant them their safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that would wish to speak?
Good evening, Board. My name's Kevin Flanagan, Flanagan. I live at 5412 South Cedar Street, about a half mile from the monastery. I've lived here in Littleton in that area, within that distance from the monastery since 1960. And my family and I have been going to that monastery probably since the mid-60s. Not every week, but on special occasions. The mother that you're hearing about is my sister-in-law. And knowing her and the community that lives there, they do not make up reasons for asking for a variance such as this. It's in their best interests. They're the religious community that we're charged with protecting. When we were growing up here in the 60s, there was actually quite a barrier of undeveloped land surrounding that entire area there. I can remember Bemis when there was nothing south of it. And the restoration of the 8-foot fence gives the sisters what they need with the least amount of disturbance to anyone there. The guy that's walked the perimeter, you may be able to see through the fence, you may be able to stand up and look over it, but an 8-foot fence will give the sisters what they need for their protection without any kind of detrimental effect on the outside area. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Teresa Gedney. I live at 2046 West Davies Avenue. My father, Stephen Gedney, just spoke briefly a minute ago. I just thought I could say briefly, I understand the Carmelite life quite in depth. I'm actually entering a Carmelite monastery in June in Nebraska, and I must let the board know that it is our obligation living outside to protect these women who have given their life to this. You don't know the service that they give us. It is so precious, yet hidden. It is our obligation to protect them. And if this 8-foot fence could do anything to help them do what they do and do it the right way and protect them, then it is our job to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there anybody else?
Hello, my name is Lisa Dean. I misunderstood what was being asked, and I would like to be able to change my no to a yes, because I do believe the sisters have a right to their privacy and security with a taller fence.
May I ask her a question? I noticed your address. Could you orient me? Where you
5977 South Gallup Street.
You live right across the street.
Right down the street from them, yes.
Right across the street?
It's across the street, but down at the end of the park.
At the end of the park?
Yeah, Gallup Park.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but you're not the first house, you're the second house in the row.
It's an apartment
Oh, an apartment,
complex.
okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Just wanted to know what
All
view
right.
you had. Now I got it in my head. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else? All right, seeing none, we'll close this portion of the public hearing and open it up for discussion amongst the board. Guess I'd like to say that there's no doubt the service that these ladies provide. It looks to me like this was an error that was done previously. There was an 8-foot fence, and this was an oversight by somebody that wasn't paying attention, obviously, to the folks that he was charged with caring for. And I don't really see that this impacts the neighborhood, really, driving up and down that street. And to be able to provide some relief, I think, by adding 2 feet to a fence, which really doesn't affect anybody except for the nuns that live within there, to allow them to go outside and not be fearful of either being seen or also preventing folks from jumping over, I think is something that that I could support.
Well, I'll add my 2 cents, I guess. Number one, I heard a concern from the public about perhaps we should do a setback and have the evergreens provide a buffer. The evergreens would provide a perfect opportunity for somebody to climb and peer over the fence. So we would, in my judgment, we would be negating the purpose of an 8-foot fence by allowing somebody to easily scale some other object and peer over it. So the security and the privacy would be negated. I think weighing the decision, I'd rather have the fence on the outside of the property line as indicated in the red here. And then I heard a concern about the transparency of the fence from the same gentleman, well thought out. However, that's not the purpose of the board to figure out what the design of the fence has to be. That is up to the building department, as far as I understand. And if the order is concerned about the privacy that the fence provides, then it's up to them to make sure and maintain it so there are no knot holes so somebody can look through it. As for the people scaling the fence, I can believe that. One afternoon, my wife and I were walking from the library south on Gallup, and we noticed one of the neighbors across the street pulling all kinds of used drug paraphernalia out of her mailbox. This is in broad daylight. So obviously that area of town has some people that like to use the parks and the privacy of the parks for illicit activity. And I can understand why they might think it a big kick to get over that fence. So quite frankly, I see the request for the 8-foot fence to be perfectly logical. However, I would still like to see the duration tied to the use of the property by the order, if that is still feasible.
I agree as amended with the duration of the property by the order. You know, based on all the security and the privacy and the safety, of course, it's a reasonable thing to do in my opinion, but I would like to see it tied to some occupancy by the current order.
So I'll just share, I've only lived in Littleton a few years and just became familiar with the Carmelite Monastery. So, but I'd say the overwhelming support from people around the neighborhood is very encouraging behind this. So I think on a lot of levels it makes a lot of sense. Regarding the proposed amendment, I am curious what that might mean for the future property owner. It sounds as if some future property owner would have to replace the fence with a 6-foot fence, unless I'm misunderstanding. And I would have some hesitation imposing some burden on a future property owner.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it really runs with that use. I'm not clear if that requires a replacement of the fence or not. We might be able to add that to the motion.
Well, one of the likelihoods of the property changing hands has been diminished in my mind simply because I did not realize there was a cemetery on site. So the order would probably be compelled to maintain that property continuously. But yes, if the property were to be sold, let's say into private hands because somebody wants to buy the mansion or whatever else, you know, I think we should revert to what the current zoning code is for Littleton. However, even with the change of title, I would suggest that the new owner could petition this board at some future date stating that the fence is in place and that they would like a variance. However, in my mind, because the city attorney provided such compelling evidence in her memorandum to us about religious facilities and care facilities that really provide a foundation for our variance. That's what I'd like to rest this on, and I would propose the amendment on that basis.
Yeah, just to add to that, I believe that RLUIPA law was made for such circumstances as this. I mean, I think this is a unique situation. Obviously, there's support for it. It meets all of our criteria necessary for us to be able to grant a variance. So, do we have any more discussion, or do we have a motion?
I guess I'll find it so I can read it. Okay, I move to approve case number VAR 16-0002, a request for variance to the 6-foot maximum fence height at 6138 South Gallup Street be approved, subject to the condition that any new fence be located either in the same location as the current fence or further set back from the right-of-way than the existing fence. This approval is based on the following findings of fact. 1, that the variance will not authorize the operation of a use other than those specifically listed as primary permitted uses for the R1 single-family zone district. 2, that the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or zone in which the property is located or substantially or permanently impair the allowed use or development of adjacent property. 3, that the variance is the minimum that will afford relief and is the least possible modification to the provision in question. 4, that the variance will not adversely affect the public health, safety, and welfare. And 5, that the hardship, if any, under which the variance is sought was not created by the owner, occupant, or agent of the owner of the property in question, nor was it suffered as a result of a violation of any provision of this code. And I would like to add my proposed amendment that this variance be of duration consistent with the continuous occupancy of the Discalced Carmelite order of the property.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, if I can make a suggestion on that motion, because I think you had at least one member who might not be comfortable with that amendment, is that you just have the motion through the number 5, and then get that seconded, and then make a motion to amend to add that condition, and then that way you can decide if you want that duration.
Better parliamentary procedure, thank you.
Do we have a second on the main motion?
I'll second.
All right, now the amendment?
Yes.
Now, yes, I wish to amend the motion adding a provision that the duration of the variance be consistent with the occupancy of the property by the Discalced Carmelite order.
May I also interject there too? I would suggest perhaps that the condition should be that the fence would be removed or lowered in the event the property is no longer either used or owned by the Carmelite nuns.
Current use?
Okay.
Is that acceptable?
I will accept that friendly amendment to the amendment.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Do we need to read that again then? We should make a motion for that.
You made the motion, we need a second.
Okay. Can we get a second on that motion?
Second that.
Okay. I guess you vote.
So you'd ask if there's any discussion first on that, just the amendment portion about limiting the duration of the fence, and then if not, go ahead and vote.
Is there any discussion on that amendment? That the fence be lowered to the 6-foot height?
Or removed.
Or removed if it changes hands from the current use? Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Can we vote?
Yes, then you're voting just on that amendment.
It was unanimous and the motion passes.
Okay. Now I guess we vote on the main motion.
Correct.
We had the main motion to approve the variance. Do we have any, we had a second on that also. Do we have any discussion? No. Vote.
The vote is unanimous and the main motion passes.
All right. I don't believe there's any other items on the agenda. So we'll close this meeting for the Board of Adjustment. Thank you very much.